This is the Inside Podcast Network. This episode of Inside Central is brought to you by Savision, makers of live maps and vital signs for System Center. Vital Signs provides an advanced, always-on, real-time performance and troubleshooting view for Microsoft Hyper-V. For more information and to download Vital Signs for free, visit www.savision.com. Hello and welcome to Inside Central. This is episode 19. We're in civvies because it's a Saturday. We made an attempt yesterday, but unfortunately our internet connections weren't all that flash hot. That being said, I would like to welcome back the man who I'd like to say he was missed in the last episode, but to be honest, I think Cameron did a fantastic job. But he's back nonetheless. It's Pete Zerger. Hey, Pete.
Hey Dan, I don't know whether to feel relief or some degree of fear on that last remark there.
No fear. I mean, I guess the good thing from my perspective is that I have somebody who's more than happy to step in your absence and pick up the workload, shall we say? But no, it's good to have you back. How was your week off? I know the listeners are dying to know.
Yeah, it was almost a week off. I only worked 20 hours last week, so
only 20 hours.
Quite the vacation.
Indeed. That's it's kind of disappointing, to be honest. I was going to say, so how was last week? Were you busy? But you can kind of say no, but I don't know. 20 hours.
So I actually have a quasi vacation coming up this week. We're flying to New Orleans tomorrow.
Huh.
For some family stuff. So in theory, I'll have some quiet time for the next week. So maybe I'll turn that into some actual vacation time.
Well, there you go. And New Orleans is meant to be quite nice. I can't say I've been myself, but
yeah, indeed, weather will be decent.
Yes, anything's better than it is here at the moment. But actually, no, it's sunny. But yeah, we shall move on. I'm looking forward to today's episode because it's going to be a scorcher. There's a hint in there as to what topic we're going to be talking about. Pete, would you like to tell the good people out there?
So I like to call this one ROI for Runbook automation. I want to talk about considerations and best practices for Runbook automation planning.
Okay.
Which is a oft ignored and misunderstood topic that we really need to give some airtime before we start, willy-nilly automating our processes.
Right, and I guess ROI is one of those things that some of the System Center products, it's quite vague how to calculate an ROI, for instance, for Operations Manager, but Orchestrator/Opalis is going to be a very easy process.
Yeah, to get a rough estimate, I think it's going to be relatively simple. It's it's not like trying to calculate the cost of manufacturing gasoline from corn.
Right.
Because in the end we know the processes that give us the most grief in terms of effort and embarrassment and headache and expense and so forth. And if we can run those through the right filters, we can actually come to a fairly objective decision about which we should approach for RBA first.
Right.
And that's really what I want to talk about today is how do we truly get to a point that we filter out the best candidates for RBA.
And I should point out to everyone who's watching this, Pete's awesome System Center hat. Sorry, I know I'm interrupting you, mate, but that's...
Here you go, the awesome System Center hat, courtesy of OpsLogic. So I won't take it off and show you the OpsLogic logo on the back. I think that's mentioned enough for free. So
yeah, it's enough free publicity, I think.
There you go.
Lovely. So back to the point.
So what started this was 5 or 6 or 10 times out in the community, I've heard people ask, what's the best practice for Runbook automation? A completely vague question, right? But I spend all my time with large enterprise organizations, and in the large enterprise, this can be a really confusing question where they have hundreds or even thousands of processes they might consider automating. So we really have to give them an objective means for boiling down, this ocean of processes to the handful that would be low-hanging fruit for RBA.
Right.
And so why don't we start with what Microsoft has published? So in some of the presentations that you've seen at MMS or TechEd in the past couple of years, there's actually an intro slide where they mention that you don't have to have an inherently complex process in order to benefit from Runbook automation. However, I put together a list of questions that I think make sense in determining which are your pool of processes that we could call our automation wish list. Those processes that we wish we could just get off our plate because they're aggravating for a variety of reasons. It could be that they're time consuming, could be that we have service levels suffering because we have a process that takes too long and is particularly error prone. We have problems that recur very frequently. We have problems that are maybe processes or problems that are maybe very expensive for the company, or maybe even processes that are visible to customers. So you're suffering not only potentially from a loss of business,
Right.
but some embarrassment and reputational impact in the process. So I think it gives us a good set of processes when we ask ourselves those questions. Virtually anybody in an organization, from the help desk people to our C-level executives, are going to have some thoughts about what's expensive, embarrassing, and frustrating for them. And you can throw that into your big pool that we'll call our RBA wish list. Okay. And I think that's where a lot of organizations stop, right there.
Right. Yep.
So they think, okay, we've got this list of things that aggravate everybody, and maybe we'll prioritize those as simply as the CIO says this one irritates him, so let's start there. And I think that's where organizations go wrong. And I've seen a couple of articles even out in the blogosphere about how organizations can benefit from Runbook automation, even if they don't have much in terms of IT process, ITIL MOF sort of implementation in their organization. And that's not entirely untrue, but in the end, we need to be thinking about that when we develop our Runbooks. But we'll get there in a second. So I thought we'd just take our listeners through how we can funnel this pool, this what often becomes a very large pool of automation. This automation wish list down to something manageable that we can approach as our organization begins to automate processes, to implement RBA for the first time. So I created what I call the RBA reality funnel. So we have all of these processes that we think are great candidates for Runbooks, and a lot of times they are, but not always. So I've got three criteria I like to run these through to get down to what we would call our true best candidates. So think of it as a series of filtering mechanisms. And the first of those, and I think the most obvious of those, is frequency of use. Mm-hmm. Right? So we know that if we look at how often, the benefit of automating a process is going to be the product of how frequently that process needs to be carried out and how much effort and expense are associated with that process. So it's really easy as a first round of filtering. Let's identify all the processes that occur most often. Run some reports from the help desk, from your change management system, look in your CMDB, and look at what of these processes is coming up most often. If I've got something that occurs 10 times a week versus once a month, I'm going to go for the high frequency process, right?
Right.
And really, we want to go beyond that and also think about how much effort is associated in a process. So if I've got two processes that recur 5 or 10 times a week, and one takes, 2 people an hour of effort, and another is a 5-minute task, then I'm going to prioritize to the higher effort task as well. So you can take the frequency times the effort and actually come up with with a calculation there. And depending on how academic you want to get down to, you can even look at the cost of the resources, right?
Right. I mean, they should all play a factor in the process of, um, you know, putting it through this filter, because everything has a cost associated with it. Everything has a time factor associated with it and a frequency. And, for instance, a simple thing like taking a real world example, creating new user accounts in Active Directory might be a high frequency process, but it's relatively low cost because it's generally going to be done by somebody on a help desk. Whereas a process that has a similar frequency but is done by a third line support engineer where you're paying them twice as much. I mean, it all has to sort of factor into the end result, surely.
Exactly. That's very well stated, actually. Um, so let's take that as our first filter. Then we've as we're funneling these down to that best candidate status. Um, the next thing we want to think about is orchestration effort. Some processes are going to be easier to automate than others, right?
Right.
So we have to think about whether this is going to take days or weeks. Is there going to be programming involved? What sort of skill set is it going to require? And for those processes where we have heavy scripting or maybe even some .NET coding involved, that may be something that an organization just doesn't have in-house. Making that particular process not such a great candidate, at least in the initial phases of RBA development. If we approach RBA with the KISS method that we have here in the States, the keep it simple, stupid method.
Yep.
You're more politely stated as a start simply mindset. Processes that prove to be high effort are probably things we should push down the priority list at least for a while.
Right.
Certainly it doesn't mean we have to abandon them, but we need to start with the easy stuff and get some wins. And I think that's where you really need to be pragmatic. I've seen at least one organization where they bit off more than they could chew. And things didn't go well. Murphy's Law kicked in, they had problems, and what they thought they were going to be able to automate in a week took a month and a half. It didn't automate that well for some other reasons, and in the end, it kind of soured the organization's view of Runbook automation, and of course, it gives the product that they tried to implement RBA with sort of a bad name as well, and unfairly so.
And I mean, as you said, that all boils down to the choices made at the initial phase of once it's implemented, right, now what? And I don't know, management have a tendency to go after those high value targets, shall we say, those that have the greatest impact, but they're not necessarily the best place to start.
Exactly. They're not really thinking about the frequency of those processes, the effort that it's going to take to automate them.
Right.
And unfortunately, CIOs and C-level folks, often they do come from a technical background, and they may be able to look at the process and determine the orchestration effort.
Yep.
But sometimes they're just too far removed from the process to truly know what skill sets and technologies are going to be involved.
Right, and that's where internal politics comes into effect, and the fact that even IT people need to be political at some points to say, look, it's not the best place to start. Try telling a manager or a C-level executive that, no, we can't start there. We need to start with this simple little process here.
Exactly. And I don't want to pick on C-level people because there are plenty of there are plenty of know-it-all technical IT people that think they have all the answers, except they don't really, right?
Yeah.
So
I did say management and C-level. So I'm lumping everybody in there.
Yeah. We just want to lump everybody in there because everybody can be equally wrong, regardless of their position on the ladder.
Wrong and pig-headed in their approach.
There you go. Myself included.
Of course, and myself.
Of course, Pete. We can all see that.
Was I too eager to agree with you then, was I?
Yeah, a little bit,
A little bit? Okay. Let's move on
So,
quickly.
so maybe now after this second step, so after the first filter of frequency of use, we've probably, categorized or prioritized our run books there in terms of their suitability for immediate RBA development. And now we run these through the orchestration effort filter. And now maybe our priorities have changed, potentially substantially. We might have moved some things down from the list. We might have even dropped some things off of the 12-month plan.
Mm-hmm.
So the third piece is what I like to call variants or exceptions. Because the fact of the matter is there are some processes that are just not all that consistent. We might have multiple factors playing into a process where a person has to be involved. And when we get into automation and private cloud and those sorts of discussions, IT people start worrying about their jobs. And certainly if you have a blue collar IT job, creating user accounts as your only skill,
Yep.
then yeah, you should be worried for your job, because I think a lot of that can be automated, right out of the box. But for most of the more complex and mid to high level IT people, so tier 2, tier 3. Pardon my watchdog
right.
there. Somebody is encroaching on our conversation here.
That's okay. The ever watchful watchdog.
So the fact of the matter is, in a lot of processes, it doesn't, fully eliminate the need for, smart people with the right mindset and the right training sitting in the chair to hit the approval button at key juncture points as we move through that run book. Because, to really, RBA doesn't mean that we have to have 100% automation. There are certainly very complex processes where we can inject manual approval points.
Right.
Sometimes using nested runbooks, so we can trigger multiple phases of an automated process, directly from our CMDB, from our ticketing system or our change management system. In System Center terms, from Service Manager. If we want to put a product.
Yep.
To what I'm talking about there.
Why not?
But in the end, I think you have to be very pragmatic about this one as well, and you need to talk to the people that are closest to the process, the people that work with it every day, that really understand the full scope of variance, because they'll understand what the variables are in the process better than the casual observer who's just looking at this process from the outside.
Right.
So the analyst that's responsible for an EDI process might know that although the file name being sent from the bank today is XYZ, tomorrow it may be, LMNOP. And it could be more, complicated than that, but they'll understand, the possibilities in terms of what can fail and what can change and so forth. So you don't want to underestimate the variance or exception there, because you can automate something. You can automate a process that, while quasi-manually performed as very reliable, suddenly becomes very unreliable because we haven't factored in all of those variables. And I think that's all too common. I've seen, we've seen that not only in RBA but in scripting. Back in the days when we try to write, VB scripts or batch files to automate things. The error handling is what this is all about. Variance and exception comes down to, what do we do when something changes or something doesn't work? And that can be tough.
It can.
And that comes down to really just understanding all of the, what I'd call the service chain, all the components in the process, and understanding the dependencies amongst those components. We've got a real simple analogy we use when we're talking about ITSM, about ITIL and MOF and process readiness with an organization. And when I talk about understanding the dependencies of a process, that's kind of a vague statement. So, and I may have used this analogy on the show before, but it's a good one, so I'm going to use it again. And that's, you're taking your wife out for a nice anniversary dinner, right? You're going to go to a nice restaurant where you're expecting a very good meal. And if we think about all of the elements that have to come together in order for that to happen, It seems like it should be very simple that if we're going to go spend, $150 or pounds in your neighborhood on a meal, we should be able to get a very good meal. But there are so many dependencies in the chain between the time you walk in the door and the time you start eating. There's really a lot that can go wrong.
Right.
So if you think about it, first we have to get in the door, and the hostess has to have properly accounted for the flow of traffic and getting us our seat in a timely way based on a reservation. And then we have to have a server, a waiter, or waitress that can take our order and accurately document all of our preferences, how we'd like things prepared, when we'd like them served, etc. And once they've documented those, then they need to go back to the kitchen, and we need two parties in a conversation, so one can communicate those preferences and the other can understand them and interpret how those impact preparation of our meal.
Mm-hmm.
And then our cook we have to have a competent chef with ingredients that somebody had brought him that day, so hopefully we're not eating canned green beans for 150 pounds.
Right.
And he has to have working equipment. We've got to have ovens and spatulas and pots and pans and all that, and sous chefs and adequate staff. And when it's all over, you've got to have a plate. A meal's just not the same without a plate, is it? So in the end, there are just, a dozen things that could go wrong even in serving a meal. And when you apply that sort of thought process to a complex, business process within our organization, the possibility of errors are endless.
Right. And the possibility of branches, I guess, is also endless to a certain extent. And you need to, I don't know, set yourself some boundaries, I guess.
That's a great point, Dan. So, the branching logic within a Runbook, the decision points where we can, interpret how the Runbook should continue based on runtime conditions, is a really important point. And it comes back, in some cases to variance. So if we interpret a particular value, and if value of condition A is encountered, then we go down branch A of condition B, branch B. In a complex process, that could be 10, 20, 50 branches.
Right. He's determined this time.
Yeah, so now my youngest son has come in and he wants me to go investigate what's happening here. So bear with me just a moment.
That's okay. While Pete's off screen, I'm actually going to take this opportunity to quickly tell our good listeners that we will be broadcasting live. I've mentioned this previously, but we will be broadcasting live from MMS this year. MMS starts on the 16th of April until the 20th of April. So we're going to be there. We'll be broadcasting live. With any luck, I say with any luck, I mean, it really depends on the sort of bandwidth that we can expect to get. But I know Pete will be joining us for a lot, the majority, hopefully, of our broadcast from MMS. Pete's back, by the way. I'm just telling the good people that will be broadcasting from MMS this year. We will be setting a dedicated time each day for doing our broadcast. And for those that are interested, for those perhaps that won't be able to watch it live, like those in Europe, because it's likely to be after midnight, we're going to be doing two podcasts, or at least the show will be broken up into two podcasts each day. There'll be a 5-minute news podcast, shall we say, just catching up on all of the announcements for the day and the like. So that'll be a short 5 to 10 minute bit at the beginning of every podcast that will be released as its own podcast, and then we'll continue on and do a full coverage of that day's MMS, including special guests and the like. So we will be firming up details for that in the coming weeks. We don't have too many weeks left, but we're firming up the details and certainly letting everybody know what time we will be broadcasting. But it'll certainly be late in the afternoon Mountain Time. I think Vegas is Mountain Time, isn't it, Pete?
Vegas is Pacific time.
Ah, okay. So it'll be late in the afternoon to early evening Pacific, US, sometime. I don't know, sort of 5:30ish for our good listeners out there. But so if you can't make it to MMS, we will be providing you with all the information that we can to keep you up to date on all the happenings and announcements at MMS.
And we have a pretty broad array of willing System Center gurus and MVPs.
We do.
That have offered their willing services for that. I was up at the MVP Summit a few days ago, and everybody seems to be in for that sort of stop by and visit with Dan sort of activity. So I think we can give you a broad array of experts to visit with at length.
That certainly sounds like a fantastic plan. So, additionally, if there is anybody listening to this who wants to participate, be a part of the panel, or I'm going to have some all of my gear. We'll probably try and have a couple of cameras set up. So if there's anyone that's willing to do some video switching for me, please give me a holler, Dan at InsidePodcastNetwork.tv. Looking for all the help and assistance that I can get whilst we're in Las Vegas.
What does video switching even mean? Can you explain that in English?
If you'd actually bothered to watch one of the videos that I've produced, Pete, you'd see what it means. I know. Effectively, what I'm doing at the moment is so right now it's just me on the video, and if I hit a button, it's now just you. If I hit another button, it's back to me with my lower third, and then I can hit another button and it's back to you, and then I can bring up your lower third telling everyone who you are. And now we're back to a split screen view where it's you on one side and me on the other. So
I see. Cool. Okay, now I get it. Yeah, well, I noticed that your video work actually looks pretty high quality, and it's deceptively high quality for somebody that I thought was just a System Center guy.
I take that as a compliment.
Even in the intro, you have all of the flying elements and the music, and it's very impressive.
Yeah, it's I'd love to take credit for that, but I can't. I didn't create that. I just edited what was already there.
Gotcha.
But as I said, I'd love to take credit for it, but that cost me $18 for that intro.
$18?
Yep.
Really?
Yeah.
That's pretty cheap.
It is. There's a website, Envato, envato.com. There's a little bit of free advertising for them. They have, stock footage and stock video and After Effects projects, Adobe After Effects, and a bunch of other websites that do, audio, so, royalty-free music and website templates and all that sort of fun stuff.
Nice. Well, what do you say we close off this RBA discussion in the next 5 or 10 so we can save some time for some talk about the latest Windows 8 chatter?
Oh, yes. Where were we up to, Pete?
Okay, so we'd identified our bucket list, our automation wish list, and we'd run that through the RBA reality funnel. So we'd looked at the high frequency processes, the orchestration effort involved, and then identified those that have minimal variance or exception that are going to be good candidates for Runbook automation. So now we have a pretty good list for RBA candidates at this point. The last piece I was hoping to talk about is what I call the last mile of RBA, and that's closing the loop with ITSM integration. So really, what I mean by that is integrating your runbooks with MOF and ITIL, because at the end of the day, documentation and governance of our runbooks, of our RBA, is going to be pretty important to determining what our ROI is.
Right.
So if I go the next step and extend my runbook into my runbook automation to integrate with my change management system, with my incident management system, I can document on the fly automatically, how many times a particular runbook has been executed, and the work that it did in that process. And what that gives me in the end is built-in reporting for my change in service management organization, so they can go in and run a report to see how often a particular runbook was utilized, was it successful or not, etc. And if we've earlier in our process, if we've established what the cost is of those processes, we can calculate our ROI in a reasonably simple way. It's not rocket science. We could build an RBA ROI dashboard in Service Manager, for example, and put that into SharePoint.
Yep.
It's what we call closed loop change. Basically extending your tools and your processes to cover the complete change management lifecycle, from the moment we execute to the review and completion processes that might happen quarterly or annually. And without that, then in some cases we're flying blind, because we can't truly understand and we can't truly appreciate and calculate what we're getting from our RBA.
Right.
And if you look at the System Center suite with System Center vCurrent or System Center 2012, one of the big advantages we have there with Orchestrator is that Service Manager and Orchestrator integrate seamlessly. In fact, the Service Manager integration pack for Orchestrator is my favorite because it's so very flexible and so easy for us. I can tie my runbook into Service Manager in about 3 activities,
Mm-hmm.
three off the shelf activities that don't require much but basic knowledge of Service Manager.
Right. You certainly showed that at MMS last year. I remember one of your sessions.
Yeah, or if you go watch the System Center Universe session we did on Orchestrator, we were able to kind of go outside paint outside the lines of an MMS session there, because it wasn't a Microsoft run event.
Right.
So I talked about beginning with the end user in mind and how to close the loop on your runbooks back to your reporting systems like Service Manager, but often overlooked but very important. And the bottom line is, if you have Service Manager, it's dead simple to achieve that sort of integration. If you don't, there's certainly some integration packs for other CMDB, asset tracking, change management products.
Yep.
And some, that I've encountered where even the users within the organization, the administrators within the organization say, you know what, I don't even want to try.
Right.
Because I don't like my system. So I think RBA in the end can be a driver for a better, more easily extensible and integratable CMDB.
Mm-hmm.
But that right there is the end of my talk. So you can consider this a first draft of best practices for the entire RBA lifecycle.
Right.
So I posted a blog for this morning for anybody that wants to go back and read on that and think on it a bit. In fact, I fired an email off to a couple of folks within Microsoft that play in that space to get some feedback on their thoughts. So we'll call this a first draft, and we'll see with a little dialogue with Microsoft if we can grow this and mature this model a bit.
I think it's really worth looking at it and dedicating more considerable effort and time to it to try and build it out, even to the point of providing end users with some tools to easily and quickly at least calculate out expected or potential ROI.
You've read my mind 3 or 4 times this session so far. Yeah, I think that there'd be a great job aid here in the form of probably an Excel spreadsheet.
Yep.
As a start. I don't think it has to be too complicated, but
No.
Yeah, you're absolutely dead on there.
They do say great minds think alike, Pete. But somehow
or maybe in our case it's just minds think alike. I'm not sure.
I was going to say for these to be great minds, I'd have to take a huge leap upwards in the tree of knowledge to even come close to that of your good self.
Absolutely not. We all have our role. We all occupy our tiny space in the System Center universe here. So,
see, look at that, folks. A thought for the day from Mr. Pete Zerger.
Deep thoughts with Pete Zerger.
Yes, it's better than my proposed houses of the poor and destitute. But that never flew. Reality TV shows that didn't quite make it.
Nice.
Yeah. Now you mentioned Windows Server 8. Before we get on to the topic at hand, have you played around with it? Were you one of the ones that ran out and downloaded the consumer preview for 8 desktop, or have you played around with server?
Yeah, I have. So I've got it running in a VM in my lab here. I'm truthfully not doing much with it. I wanted to see. I'd heard a lot of rumors about folks struggling to navigate the interface.
Right.
One really smart virtualization guy I know mentioned that it took him half an hour to figure out how to shut Windows 8 down. And already, if we go out to the net, there have been a number of conversations. I've been sort of tweeting about Windows 8, just the tidbits I find useful. But one of those I remember I found useful was how to bring the start menu back.
Right.
Which has been a pretty popular thread in the Windows 8 discussion.
Yeah, I can imagine it would be. I think that was one of the first things that the Windows guy Paul Thurrott posted on his super site was, the reg hack to get back the start menu.
Yeah, I bet. I think that Metro UI makes a lot of sense for phones and tablets and the like. I think it's just less exciting for desktop folks.
Well, I mean, it's clearly not designed for the enterprise. It's aimed at the consumer market. And the enterprise might use it from a consumer perspective, digesting information through a tablet or something like that. But from the get-go, even Microsoft have said, if you are an organization and you're looking at holding off OS deployment for Windows 8, don't bother. Go with Windows 7. You're not really going to gain anything by holding out for Windows 8 to be released before you do an OS refresh. Makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, in the end, if there's not a massive gain there. Now, granted, on the server side of the house, when we're looking at virtualization, that's a game changer there. But that's probably fodder for another discussion. But yeah, that Metro UI looks like it's designed for the finger crowd, the people that want to get fancy with their fingers like we do with iPads and Galaxy tabs and all that. So
indeed.
I have to say I'm looking forward to Microsoft releasing a tablet that is actually something other than a tablet with a PC OS loaded on it.
So you're happy that Microsoft are moving away from the old, rotate screen, includes a keyboard, the old XP tablets that, let's be honest, I don't know, they were never going to be a commercial success.
Oh, for sure. Where you have a full PC where the screen rotates around and it's prone to breaking and so forth. I actually had one of those that I bought because it was small, so I was taking a lot of long haul international flights at the time.
Right.
And I could plug it in and work in a small space, but the tablet functionality didn't really even work until Windows 7.
Yeah, and even with Windows 7, it's not a touch interface. It's, it's still the same OS. They're just adding a layer over the top that it's always felt clumsy. So I'm happy that Microsoft are going in the direction that they are, and I won't be getting an iPad 3 or the new iPad or the whatever they're calling it. I don't know. I'll be waiting for a second gen Windows 8 tablet, I think.
Yeah, me too. I'm gonna wait and see what happens for sure. My iPad, I've got the original iPad 3G enabled, so for me, I've loaded enough tools that I can manage all of my mailboxes from there. I've got a project management tool, an office tool, a Visio reader, great cloud storage. I am the master of cloud storage. I tell you what, I've got 75 gigs of free cloud storage amongst two products. And over 100 gigs total, and I've got a tool on my tablet that will allow me to move documents and folders between
those cloud providers.
The providers. So I mean, for me, it's a business tool.
Yep.
What's going to be exciting is when we see a Windows 8 laptop that has a touch interface, because me and many of the people I know that use tablets a lot for work. we have this sort of fever that's developed that when we put the tablet down and we get on our PC, we begin to touch the screen and to
Right.
try to do things, and then quickly realize, yeah, I'm not on my tablet anymore. So,
Yep. I think IBM are coming out with one. They're rumoured to have displayed one at CES this year that's a hybrid laptop come tablet type device, and no doubt we'll probably be seeing more and more of those as this year progresses.
So I fear that's going to be my next $5,000 purchase. Then is a touch-enabled laptop.
$5,000. Really?
Yeah, I'm going to have to load a bunch of memory and some SSD drives.
Yeah,
It's going to have to be. It's going to have to be a Windows 8, hypervisor enabled laptop at the end that I can also touch.
Yeah. See, I can't go out and do that. I bought back in December. I bought the Asus.
The Ultrabook?
Yeah, the Ultrabook. So I'm still. I need to get at least another 6 months use out of that before I can justify to the wife going out and buying something new.
Oh man, I'm glad I'm not the only one that has that problem. So what did you see on the wire this morning about System Center in Windows 8?
So I'm going to flick video here for a second, just because I'm going to have to minimise your window, Pete. But I saw a tweet, and you'll have to forgive me, but I can't recall his name, but no doubt you'll know, Pete. And this is hyper-v.nu. What's the gentleman's name?
So it's Hans Bredevoort. I know I'm pronouncing it wrong. Hans is a Dutch MVP in the cloud and data center space. We're in the same silo.
Okay.
So Hans is long story short, Hans is a virtualization wizard.
Guy. Oh, cool. Well, he tweeted that Microsoft have announced, and this is on his blog, which I'll include in the show notes, but early test version available for System Center 2012 SP1 and Windows Server 8 Beta. So it's interesting considering that we're talking about a beta product for System Center, which is not yet as released.
Mm-hmm.
So that in and of itself is kind of interesting that they're already betaing certain elements of some Service Pack 1 type things for System Center. But reading through that post, it looks as though it's support for a number of System Center products, support for Windows Server 8. So let me try that again. It's allowing certain System Center products to natively and actively support Windows Server 8. And the two products that he mentions on here is to say that the focus of this CTP is on VMM and DPM in combination with Hyper-V, and is therefore not aimed to work with all of the other System Center 2012 modules. It essentially focuses on managing the fabric of your private cloud, including Windows Server 8. So it's I guess extending the capabilities of System Center into that Server 8 space, which as yet, we've really only just been able to get a good look at.
So it's Service Pack 1, you're saying?
That's what his website is telling me.
Well, that's good. So that tells us where Windows 8 support is coming, right? Because our virtual processor support goes from 4 up to much larger, 32 if memory serves.
Yeah, sounds about right. Yep.
So they're kind of hitting VMware with a big club there. I'm going to be interested to see how the VMware marketing machine starts dealing with the improvement in the hypervisor.
Right. I guess the other thing is looking at the roadmap, at least the release roadmap. All the System Center 2012 products will be out before Windows Server 8. I don't think there's any question of that. So it's hard to support a product that's not yet readily available that has an RTM. I don't think it's a stretch to say that Ops Manager will support Server 8 either at launch or shortly thereafter. I don't think that's a stretch from an agent perspective, but with the improved hypervisor of Server 8, I think it makes sense for Microsoft to be pushing something around VMM. DPM's interesting, but certainly VMM is where the action's going to be.
Oh, for sure. That's doing most of the heavy lifting.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely.
So as I said, the details for that we'll put in the show notes. I've also mentioned to our good listeners that we will be broadcasting from MMS, so I've covered that off. Anything else you wanted to broach?
No, just to say that I'm looking forward to MMS this year. I'm going to be interested to see how we do with the podcast. We'll have some T-shirts there for System Center Central, the virtual user group, System Center Podcast.
We will.
And some of our community sponsors there. So, and in fact, we're going to be doing a little community giveaway. So we're toying around with plucking wearers of our T-shirts and related, hats and memorabilia from the crowd and awarding them with things like tablets.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
I'll have to make sure I wear mine every day.
That is exactly right, Dan. You will be fully eligible. But
really,
we were thinking about a contest that really rewards people for an active show of support a community.
Right. Yep.
So it's no fun to see your swag go in the go in the rucksack and not find its way out until they're working on the car in their driveway,
or until they're doing podcasts years later.
Well, there you go.
Something along those lines, right?
Yeah.
All right.
Good stuff. Well, I've got a few things queued up for the coming weeks here, and a couple of guests that I think folks will enjoy. I think we might get over even into the Dynamic Data Center Toolkit, which I've been wanting to hear more about.
DDC.
Yeah. So we'll see what comes, but definitely good things to come here between now and MMS.
Indeed, and again, I should point out MMS has sold out. So it sold out maybe about a week ago, I think.
Yeah.
So there is a waiting list. I guess good luck if you didn't manage to get tickets and are looking to go. I wish you luck. But as I said, if you don't manage to get tickets to MMS, you can tune in to Inside Central or to the Inside Podcast Network, and we will bring you all the latest news, views, and gossip from MMS with Pete and myself and a bunch of great guests. So really looking forward to it this year. If you have nothing else, Mr. Zerger, I think we shall call it quits.
I will bid you good day.
This has been Inside Central. We will be back next week at some stage. We generally try to do it on a Friday afternoon, but it doesn't always work out like that. But you can download us on the Monday mornings. Again, you can feel free to send me any feedback, or if you want to help out with the podcast at MMS, please send me an email to dan@insidepodcastnetwork.tv. I look forward to seeing you all there. Come by and say hi when we know where we're going to be. But until next week, have a great week, and we'll talk to you then.